Welcome to 28storms.com. This is your tropical weather update for Monday, August 15th. The two main features in the Atlantic are Tropical Storm Gert, located just to the east of Bermuda, and also now reactivated 93L Invest, now beginning to make its way through the Lesser Antilles. The Hurricane Center is giving this a 20% chance of formation over the next 48 hours, and a Hurricane Hunter reconnaissance plane is now scheduled to investigate this disturbance tomorrow. So this is the one that we've been talking about, how it's not quite dead just yet. It will have to be closely monitored as it makes its way throughout the Caribbean. The latest advisory on Tropical Storm Gert from the National Hurricane Center indicates that maximum sustained winds are 60 miles per hour. It's now moving due north at 12 miles per hour, and a bend more toward the northeast is expected to begin within the next 24 hours. In addition, that center is passing just to the east of the island, and therefore tropical storm warnings have been canceled, and therefore conditions across Bermuda really are not going to be all that significant. All the main weather is passing off just to your east. Over the last 24 hours, the models have also had to shift more toward the right. There's the island of Bermuda, and obviously all the model guidance now has the storm moving away from you. This all along has looked like a rather non-event here for Bermuda, although what could not really be foreseen was just how much of this convection would remain just to the east of your locale. If we look at the latest infrared imagery, we see that all the biggest convection and shower activity is remaining just to the east of Bermuda, which is located right here. And so we're really being spared the worst of the conditions, and this is really not much of an event. If we look at the water vapor imagery, we see that the system is becoming a little bit better defined under favorable upper level conditions. And also, if we turn on the latest sea surface temperatures, we see that the system still has a bit of a time period here where it could develop a little bit more. There is an outside chance that it could become our first minimal hurricane of the season, but it only has a brief window until we get into some cooler water temperatures up here more toward the northeast. And really quickly, here is the local Bermuda radar showing that there's really not even much in the way of shower activity impacting the island, and here's that low-level center passing well away. If we turn to the rest of the basin, we can see the remnants of yet another invest that was located to the southeast of Gert, but as mentioned about 3 days ago, much of that invest would be entrained into the low-level center and form a primary tropical storm here near Bermuda, and sure enough, that's what we had with Tropical Storm Gert. So we're not expecting any additional formation in the western Atlantic. The Gulf of Mexico is quiet, along with the Caribbean, although now we have 93L Invest, which has been resurrected from the dead. We've been talking about this feature despite that over the last 2 days, and interest in the Western Caribbean should still pay a lot of attention to this system. It's only going to provide the Lesser Antilles with some shower and thunderstorm activity over the next 24 hours, but it will have some potential to develop in the Caribbean over the course of the week. Also, before the video wraps up, we will closely talk about some Eastern Pacific development near the Gulf of Tehuantepec. This is a more zoomed in satellite view of 93L Invest, and we do see a distinct low-level turning in the cloud pattern, especially right around here along the lower half of the tropical wave axis. However, there are no indications that we have a well-defined surface circulation just yet, so this is more than likely in the mid-levels. And as we can see, there is a lot of robust convection associated with this strong tropical wave, and the upper level environment doesn't look all that unfavorable. We don't really see much in the way of vertical wind shear. However, there is a lot of dry air, as denoted by these darker colors here across much of the central Caribbean, and that's going to be the main limiting factor, but that will not be enough to rule out the possibility of tropical cyclogenesis. This is the most recent Vorticity product from the SIMS website, and as we can see, the Vorticity Max really isn't all that strong yet, but there is plenty of time for this to develop across the Caribbean. As we can see, those wind shear values are forecast to be relatively light, as they currently are less than 10 to 15 knots and are expected to remain that way. All interest in Central America, from Honduras all the way northward throughout the Yucatan Peninsula, should keep an eye on this system. This is the low-level steering analysis, and this will be the primary steering for this tropical wave, since it's still relatively weak at the moment. And you can see that the low-level easterly flow is dominating much of the Caribbean, and that is the reason why all of the models are taking this on a general west to west-northwest track over the next 5 days. Now, these are the tropical models, and we're also going to take a closer look at the dynamical models in just a moment. Now, before we get too much carried away with 93L Invest, I would like to make it clear that there is now a lot to talk about in the Atlantic, which is to be expected as we get into mid and late August. There's really not that much in the central or eastern Atlantic at the moment, but keep an eye on this tropical wave that just exited the coast of Africa. Now several of the dynamical models are beginning to develop that into a tropical cyclone as it begins to approach the eastern Caribbean toward the medium range. And even into the eastern Pacific, the Hurricane Center has 3 areas being highlighted. Now, the first 2 systems are going to move out to sea, so those aren't a concern. But we have this now new 30% area, and we talked about this yesterday. This would be the primary feature to watch. The Hurricane Center is giving this system a 30% chance of development near the Gulf of Tehuantepec, and I would say that there is about a 60% chance that this will remain just offshore of the Mexican coastline. But interests right along here need to keep a very close watch on this, as once again it will at least pass very close to your locale. If we look really briefly on the latest floater satellite, we see that there's nothing overly strong here to the south of Mexico just yet, but we definitely have some low-level turning. The latest infrared does show an increase in convection near a low-level center, and upper-level conditions look fairly favorable for slow intensification. And as stated before, much of the remainder of the eastern Pacific continues to be active, but all of these tropical disturbances along the monsoon trough are expected to remain well out at sea. So now that we have outlined every area to keep a close watch on, we're now going to look at what the 12Z dynamical model forecasts are calling for. And so really quickly, this is 93L Invest. This will be the main feature to key in on. And as we start this animation, we see that the CMC is now developing this once again into essentially a tropical storm as it heads in the general direction of San Pedro, Belize. And I know we have a lot of interest there, so I like to talk about you guys to keep you guys as informed as we possibly can. And so definitely keep an eye on this. As we've been talking about the last few days, this could easily develop into our next tropical depression or even tropical storm of the 2011 hurricane season. And with the ridging to your north, this should keep the system on a general west to west-northwest heading into Central America and possibly the Bay of Campeche down the road. So definitely a Central American storm. It should pass to the south of the United States based on the current mid-level pattern. Now, if we look elsewhere, though, here's that tropical wave now exiting Africa, and it's forecast to keep a general movement toward the west-northwest, so that's going to be the next major system for the Eastern Caribbean to keep a close watch on. And finally, if we look into the Eastern Pacific as the run starts over again, we see that the CMC keeps that storm just to the south and west of the Mexican Riviera. Now, the latest 12Z GFS model is not quite as enthused with 93L Invest as the Canadian is. Here is the Vorticity Max gradually moving into northern Honduras without really much in the way of significant tropical development. But I'll stop this at day 7, and the storm that we're now currently following near the Gulf of Tehuantepec was forecast by the GFS to remain just south of you, much like the Canadian CMC, and by day 7 it's sitting well to the west-southwest of the Baja Peninsula. But you may also notice this third system now coming into the Eastern Caribbean, and once again, that is that tropical wave that starts off near the coast of Africa this afternoon. And much like the CMC, the GFS gradually shows this moving across the Central Atlantic, and then toward the end of the period, it's definitely trying to make a run at becoming our next tropical system in the Eastern Caribbean. Now we're looking at the latest 12Z ECMWF. Keep in mind the European model is the best dynamical model that we have, and although the GFS is not developing anything in the Caribbean over the next 72 hours, this European agreement along with the Canadian CMC leads me to believe that there is a fairly legit chance of tropical development here. Here is 93L Invest. This is the current hour. This is the Lesser Antilles right here, and if we look very carefully, we see by 24, 48, and 72 hours, we see gradual development throughout the period here on the European model. And by day 4, we now have a developing tropical depression, possibly even a tropical storm just off the northeastern tip of the coast of Honduras here. And then by day 5, we see a little bit more northerly progression toward Belize. And by day 6, it's moving inland over the southern half of the Yucatan Peninsula. And also, if you weren't paying much attention to the central and eastern Atlantic, we see that that next tropical wave, the one that's now coming off the coast of Africa, is moving over the northern half of the Lesser Antilles here by day 6, and then by day 7 it's moving across Puerto Rico, and this is really getting far out. But if we look into the day 9 range, we see that there is a fairly hefty tropical cyclone beginning to work its way into the southeast Bahamas. So obviously there was a lot to cover in this afternoon's video, but the primary focus will be on 93L Invest, as that system has the best chance to develop and possibly threaten land as an organized tropical cyclone in the 3 to 6 day time frame. So we're going to keep a close eye on 93 along with all of the aforementioned features in the Eastern Pacific and Atlantic Basin, and again we will be providing more comprehensive analysis as the threats become more severe. So thanks again for following 28storms.com, and we will have another video update fairly soon.